Hey listeners, Mallory Wilsey here, Chief Producer of the Enrollify Network. I get the privilege of working alongside all of our creators at Enrollify, but I wanted to take just a quick moment to tell you about why I love the Talking Tactics podcast hosted by Diana Kibbolds. Every other Tuesday, Day drops a new episode where she focuses on a single tactic that moved the needle on any enrollment metric, from inquiries and booth visitors to apps completed and deposits, even registrations, you name it. The catch? The tactic had to be done with limited resources, either by a single person or a small but mighty team, or limited time, or maybe without a lot of money. The podcast format is fun and engaging, and it's just different from the more traditional 60-minute interview style shows. If you work in enrollment management or marketing, be sure to give Day's show a listen. You can subscribe to the show by visiting podcast.enrollify.org or just search Talking Tactics wherever you get your podcasts.
Hit it! That's what I'm talking about. Wait!
Okay, now, from the beginning.
Hit it, boys.
Welcome to M&A in Higher Ed, a special 5-part pulse check series on mergers and acquisitions within the higher education sector, brought to you by Enrollify and Element 451. I'm Kin Sejpal from the University of Redlands, and over the next 5 weeks, I will be your guide through the intricate process of institutional consolidation and what it signifies for our industry's future. By examining both the challenges and successes, we can better prepare for the evolving landscape of higher education, ensuring that we navigate these changes in ways that strengthen our institutions and serve our communities effectively. Now, let's jump into today's episode. Hello, Ethan and Katie. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm so excited and looking forward to our conversation, especially because it's about Purdue. And for those of you who don't know, I'm a 2-time alumna of that fine university, and I can't wait to dig into the brand conversation with these two fabulous, talented folks that I have here with me. So, Ethan and Katie, I know you, but for the listeners who don't, can you tell us a little bit about your role and your background?
I'm Kati Pratt. I myself am a Boilermaker alum as well. So boiler up. Excited for that. I've been with the Purdue University since 2018 in various marketing roles, like working in our central marketing department since 2019 under Ethan Braden for the majority of that time, really overseeing and leading our brand, our marketing strategists, our social team for the university. And then starting in, was it 2022? We started working together on the rebrand for Purdue Global.
I'm Ethan Braden, 4 months into my tenure now at Texas A&M University. But until December of last year, for 5 years, I was at Purdue University, finalizing as the Executive Vice President of Marketing Communications and the Chief Marketing Officer for both it and Purdue Global. Spent 5 wonderful years there. I'm a Boilermaker husband, so at least I have that tie-in. And
Boilermaker by
before that, I spent
association.
Yeah, and yeah, absolutely. I definitely drank the black and gold Kool-Aid. And before that, I spent 10 years in brand management at Eli Lilly and Company.
Thank you. Well, this is an exciting time for Boilermakers. I know when this podcast releases, the results probably will be out, but I am still so stoked. And I can see Katie really like all jazzed and excited, and Ethan is smiling as Purdue has made it to the Final Four in March Madness for the first time since 1980. Let's dive into our topic, which is not March Madness, although that would be a fun topic to dig into at some point. It's about mergers and acquisitions. So, can you tell us a little bit about Purdue Global and how that became part of the Purdue system, Ethan?
Yeah, I mean, it really begins with our former and fearless and visionary leader in then President Mitch Daniels, formerly 2-time governor of the state of Indiana, Mitch Daniels, who leading up to 17 was visionary, I think, enough to look at the landscape, one, and see the need for a really powerful online educational offering. And two, also understood our land grant history and was looking to the 40 million Americans out there with some college credit but no degree, and wondering if Purdue University could play a role in transcending again the state lines, this time using technology with education. And so it was Mitch, and through his connections and friendships and his vision, who struck a conversation with Kaplan at the time, in particular Donald Graham. Mitch had assessed that at that point in time it was going to be, and I think this is an important learning, right, more impactful and certainly faster to buy versus build. And so he and Donald and Kaplan struck a deal between Purdue and what was Kaplan University at that time to engulf and take on Kaplan University and rebrand and rethink that offering moving forward as Purdue Global, or Purdue University Global at the time, with the new name, a lot of Purdue influence, but still a Kaplan largely operation and nucleus.
Thank you for that context. So, what was your role back then and now for Katie when it comes to Purdue Global? How do you lead and support that entity?
Well, and I would say a lot of it started with Ethan's appointment to becoming the executive vice president and chief marketing officer in April of, was that 2022? Yes, years are hard. Yeah, of 2022, when he became the CMO of Purdue University, Purdue Global, and Purdue Online. And with the board, charging us like, we really want to bring Purdue Global into the Purdue family fully. I mean, it had been, Purdue University Global, it had the name, it had a logo since 2018, but we hadn't fully embraced it. We hadn't really given it a purpose. We hadn't really defined its lane, its marketing proposition, who they were for, any of that. So when he came on board with that, I remember we had a conversation in the union. He's like, hey, I'm getting ready to get this opportunity. I'd like you to come alongside, because we'd worked together on the Purdue University rebrand in 2020, and then all the work with Protect Purdue. So we knew we'd be a good team to tackle that together. So I came alongside and really led a lot of the day-to-day as we kicked off that work stream in the research and the brand and the relationship management with our partners, of our research partners, our agency, and Kaplan as well.
Thank you. Ethan, what was your role with sort of the naming and leading this effort from 2018, 2017 to last year?
Yeah, very little in the beginning. I started in November of 18 at Purdue as the number two, so a vice president to Dan Hassler at the time, who I knew from Lilly and who was serving as the chief marketing officer for Mitch. It's interesting, early in 19, we flew down to Fort Lauderdale and met with Kaplan for the first and largely only time as a marketing unit, and broke bread and looked at the strategy and got to know the players. And I think it was pretty clear at that time we knew very little ourselves about the online adult education market. That persisted for a couple of years, and it was really late 21 into 22 where I just can't help myself at times. I'm a bit of a dog on the bone when there is a brand management positioning, sort of, who are you, what do you stand for, and why should people care challenge. And we identified that in what was at that time Purdue University Global, feeling like, one, it had the Purdue name. And so there's a brand respect, a brand protection, brand management challenge there that I felt accountable to. And then two, looking at the marketing and the branding and the positioning at the time and thinking that it could be more insightful, more specific, more differentiating, more Purdue than what it was at the time. And so beginning to challenge our institution to take greater hold of the operation, to take greater hold of the strategy and the positioning of the operation, and in doing so with Kaplan.
Thank you. So when you and Katie met at the union on this topic, which union brings fond memories back to me, what did y'all determine we have to do, or y'all had to do, in order to launch into this whole idea of defining what the Purdue Global brand is? And I understand there was some research done. So can you expand a little bit about How did you get started? What types of research was done? How did you arrive at what was your intended outcome? Katie?
There was a lot of research that was conducted. I think one of the key like aha moments where we knew that we had a lot of opportunity came with a research study that Kaplan had actually conducted with Ipsos on a brand tracker for brand awareness. And that came back in that summer of 22. It was that we were sitting at what, at 0% unaided brand awareness. So we knew that there was nowhere to go but up in terms of like having individuals understand, know Purdue Global. So that was one kind of research study that kind of propelled the work, first of all. And then when we decided it was time to kick off, we kind of parallel pathed it. We did a level set on everything that we had with all the major stakeholders in the room because we knew that that was really important to have all the different entities at the table from the beginning so that they could have a voice and understanding of what it is we were trying to achieve. And then we partnered with Ology, our agency. We did a competitive landscape study to kind of really understand what's the market because the online education market is very different than your higher ed residential market as well. So we wanted to understand that. We have a great partnership with Google as well. So like their findings and like their trends and what they see as market potential as well for online higher ed and for Purdue as well. And then we knew that first and foremost, we really needed to understand our students, our audience, better than we did at that point in time. So we partnered again with a market research firm in Chicago called Brand Trust, and they specialize in a form of marketing research called emotional inquiry. So they really dig into like the emotional drivers of a decision and like they really kind of help you unearth these core insights about your segment, your bullseye of who you were for. And we did about 42 interviews. And from all that work, we distilled like 3 core insights that then became the foundation of everything else we did.
Fascinating. I remember doing some of this work at Purdue, but also at other institutions. It's amazing how much research can shed light on really some of those key drivers that otherwise aren't, people have hypotheses, but not really data driven insights. But, you talked about the online education piece and that you needed to understand that a bit better and you needed to understand the audiences there. And so, what did you learn about online audiences? And as you were thinking about the brand in the context of Purdue brand, how did you navigate the similarities and differences between the master brand and the online education brand, i.e., Purdue Global? Understanding that it was catering to a very different audience, but it still needed to be Purdue.
Let me tack on a little bit to what she just said as a setup for that. She makes reference to the brand equity tracker, which was such a important at the time for us scorecard, report card, not just for us, but even for our board on down. And things like seeing very low, whether it was aided or unaided awareness relative to very different competitive set that we were not used to, that certainly our board and others were not used to, and seeing how they fared or shined. So, normally we might be looking at the Big Ten or some of our aspirational peers at Georgia Tech or MIT or Michigan, et cetera. In this case, you're looking at the juggernauts that are Western Governors and Southern New Hampshire, Arizona State Online, Penn State Global, University of Maryland Global Campus. Those are really different players. And to see where we stood relative to them was pretty insightful and also pretty indicting. Because it wasn't just about the unaided awareness or the aided for that matter, because there was this confusion between Purdue and Purdue Global. But 2, as you look at that, I think there's an important learning of what do you want to stand for and what do you want to be known for? And when we saw attributes that Purdue is normally known for, rigor, respect, trust, high caliber, high quality faculty, for instance, a place I could be proud to say I went to, things of that nature, we were usually at parity, if not worse. And so that was also really insightful to say, we need to go out into this market and stand for something using the equity of Purdue to do so and break out of that, right? We can't be a commodity in this giant sea of online adult education because there are major players there, but they're, oftentimes undifferentiated. And we've got some things that frankly they didn't have, right? In the history, in the longevity, in our brand that they would long for. And frankly told me on certain chief marketing councils, I'm glad you're not exploiting those things because I can't go there with you. So really understanding what we stood for, who we were, and why, the target audience should care was a quest, but it was really set up by that deep understanding in the beginning of we really didn't stand for anything and we were really unknown. And that's a problem in that space. So as we thought about the study of the students and what those insights were going to be for us to stand on, to differentiate, to be distinct, let me turn it back over to Katie on that.
First and foremost, our students are very different for each. Like as a central marketing unit, we deeply understand that 18 to 22-year-old student, what their drivers are, what their questions are, like what their needs are. So when it came time with this project, we needed to better understand our Purdue Global students who are typically over the age of 30, have a dependent, are working, a third of which are military affiliated, and about half are kind of in that lower income bracket as well. So very different from those students who come for that residential experience at 18. These are people that are coming back to school. Maybe they tried college right out of high school, it didn't work for them then. And now they're saying like, hey, I need that degree to take that next step in my career to kind of open more doors and opportunity for myself, my family, and beyond. So that's where like those insights became foundational for us to really clearly define our segment, our audience. And so, you'll see in all of our marketing, but it became really clear that, Purdue Global is Purdue's online university for working adults. And so by having that gave us a clear lane of which like we're operating in for Purdue Global to go to market. And we also knew through the marketing research on the competitive landscape that there was a lot of white space to be able to differentiate ourselves by making an emotional connection with those individuals. And because currently in the market, a lot of what you'll see is flexible, affordable, like things that, you can kind of just, we always talked about, you could just switch out all the logos and it could be for another university. So we really wanted to kind of lean in to that and to like these student stories because they are emotional. Like if you talk to these students, if you attend a Purdue Global graduation, I mean, the cowbells, the foghorns that are going off, the, praising the Lord and, the tears, like there's just the sheer emotion that happens at a Purdue Global graduation is something that it's hard to explain unless you've experienced it. I know like the first time I went there, it's very different because it means so much more to them because they worked so much harder for it at that point in time and it was their choice. So we wanted to make sure we captured all of that and we wanted to clearly communicate that to the world through our branded house.
Early on, we heard from the Purdue faculty and naysayers that this Purdue Global or Purdue University Global offshoot was going to cannibalize or water down the brand or hurt the brand. And I think you have to think about that, of course. I think the other piece, though, that we were trying to get through, especially in this round of research and beyond, was, for instance, what you see with Clay Christensen and the Innovator's Dilemma, which was Purdue Global is not competitive to Purdue University, right? It's much like when Honda came to the United States, Toyota the same, I believe, where they'll say they weren't competing against Chrysler and Ford and Chevy. They were competing for a non-consumer at that time, trying to bring them into the market. So they would say they were competing against the bicycle for starters, right? And I would try to make this point of the students largely at Purdue Global are never coming to Purdue. They're not going to cannibalize or challenge this. This is a non-consumer group of 40 million Americans who have a distinct need to get a degree with a place they trust, a degree that they can respect, and be treated like working adults in that fashion. And we can either serve them or not, right? We can serve them with what we believe our mission is as Purdue, or Southern New Hampshire, Western Governors, Grand Canyon, others are going to do it. Do we want to have a play for them or not? And do we want that to be excellent? And so that, I think, was what we were trying to build in the portfolio was this is a completely new space, completely different student that we do not understand. And as Katie says, go to graduation, and it is the most emotional, hopeful, graduation ceremony I've ever seen when children and grandchildren are cheering on their grandparents walking across stage. It gives me goosebumps. And that's not what that 18 to 22-year-old graduation looks like. And so anytime we had to convince somebody of this is a new opportunity, this is a distinct opportunity that we can serve or not, we would just take them to graduation. And they saw the light. They got the gospel, 2.5 hours later.
I mean, I'm just listening to that story and I got goosebumps. I haven't even witnessed the graduation, so I can only imagine. So, I mean, yeah, going into the M&A space a little bit deeper, I mean, obviously this was an acquisition, right? And so was the strategy then always to be a branded house, or was that something that y'all worked through when it came to kind of how do we fit them into the brand architecture of Purdue?
Yeah, I don't know that there was a lot of branded house or core brand management thought given early on in this relationship. I think it was about partnering and acquiring certain competencies. Obviously, partnering and acquiring capabilities, partnering and acquiring scale, right? So there were 30 some thousand students from the very beginning that were Kaplan University at the time when we took over. So you already had a pretty significant student or customer base. Moreover, you think about call centers, you think about demand generation, you think about performance marketing, you think about all that infrastructure that's associated with an online university. And we had very little of that at the time. And so I think a lot of it was about partnering for something that you don't have to serve that customer that you don't currently serve. I think what we brought to it over a couple of years and had to really, you know, understand and dig and unearth a problem, which was at that time it lacked brand strategy, it lacked brand management, it lacked Purdue-ness, right? It had the name and it sort of had the colors and it had a mark. And they would show at times the pictures of the Purdue campus, for instance, but there wasn't a great understanding of what does the Purdue-ness in that degree promise or mean for me as a student or a graduate. I like to say, within Hilton, within that portfolio, wherever you stay, you have that Hilton promise. And there may be Hilton Garden Inn and there may be Conrad, but at the end of the day, there's a Hilton common thread. There's a floor of quality and expectation that name brings versus Bob's Motel down the road. At the time, I don't think we were communicating what that Purdue promise was in that name. And as soon as you give the thing your name, you're accountable, right? You're liable, you're responsible. The son-in-law has married into the family and he's yours now, right? So are you going to embrace him or are you going to keep him afar? And I think it was critical for us to deeply think about what we stood for, even in that offering that did justice to that Purdue name.
I mean, it sounds like the easy part, which isn't easy for some other institutions, is the colors and the name and the mark, and felt like that was a little bit of that was already agreed upon to a certain extent. You really were trying to get the emotional piece into the whole messaging and framing of the narrative. Is that a fair statement to make, that the visual piece was less of a focus, but not focus, but that wasn't where you spent a lot of energy on, because it was predetermined that this being part of Purdue will extend the Purdue's visual elements into their system?
Yeah, I'll start on that one. I also use quotes, not just analogies,
Okay.
quotes. But it's Payush Pandey at Ogilvy, who at Cannes a couple of years ago said, if the story's not great and if the story's not human, no technology will save you, not today or not in the future. And to me, brand colors, logos, taglines, websites for that matter, aren't going to save you either. And so that's the easy stuff, right? People want to, everyone's a marketer. And now down in my new role, everyone's got a tagline for me or a new campaign for me. And that's fine. I appreciate the input and sometimes they're good, but that's the easy stuff, right? The tough stuff, the substance, is that story underneath. It's the context, it's the why, it's the emotion, it's the positioning of what does this mean? I always go back to it. Who are you? What do you stand for? And why should people genuinely care or trust you? And you don't get that through logos. You don't get that through names. You don't get that through taglines or colors. You get that through substance, through storytelling over time, through messaging, and then delivering on that experience in a consistent, congruent way to the brand. And so I think that's what we operated for a while was if you give the thing the name, it's going to sell itself. And it didn't.
Yeah, if you build it, they will come.
People, exactly. As I always say, like Target can buy Dollar General and throw a red sign out front. But if you walk in the Dollar General at that point in time and you don't see Target Corner Market, you still see Dollar General, you go, this is Dollar General. And so I don't think we had fully embraced or integrated what Purdue meant into that. The easy stuff is signage and names and stuff. The hard stuff is that substantive brand development, that value promise, and then delivering on that experience in every one of your touch points from the very begin to graduation and beyond.
Yeah. And I think it is easier in the case of acquisitions because you know that you will be conforming more to the parent brand when it comes to the visual identity. We also want to try to align with the parent brand core essence as much as possible. But in where it's actually quote unquote mergers, I think there is a little bit less easiness in terms of how you get to that end state. But this is good insight, especially for universities that are looking to acquire or universities that do get acquired, depending on the relationship that you have with the parent brand and the organization. Some things will be a given. I mean, it's not that that should be the focus of our work. I wholeheartedly believe, Ethan, that it is about the substance. But sometimes the rub really just comes with, okay, no, our students have always known us and recognize us because we have this green that associates them with our brand and such. I don't know that you had to navigate some of that, but you did have some other challenges.
Yeah, I like what you just said. And we said this for a while too. I think the early days were the acquisition, and that the hard work in the marketing that I think we attempted to bring along, and of course partnered with some really talented people at Kaplan on this, was the true merger, right? It's one thing to acquire, it's another to actually merge and integrate. Another quote, but Adam Grant says, worry less about being on brand and worry more about getting in character, right? What was that Purdue character of global that people could look at it and say, oh, it's got the Purdue rigor, or it's got the Purdue grit, or it's got the Purdue innovation, or it's got the Purdue collaboration, or it's got the Purdue persistence. Like, what about it makes it Purdue? And I think for us, and as you think about the acquisition and merger, the acquisition is, the acquiring, got it, we've got you. But let's actually think about mosaic. Let's think about integration. How do we merge? And when it merges, right? Is that a really good benefit and a more beautiful end product, or is it a mess? And so I think there's a lot of thought in the merger piece.
Hey, it's Mallory. Exciting news! I'm hosting the Engage Summit in Raleigh on June 25th and 26th, and I'd love to meet you there. Together, we'll dive into the mind of the modern student, what fires them up, how they interact, and what they expect in today's digital age, and how tools like AI help put them in the driver's seat of their education. We have some terrific speakers, including our closing keynote, New York Times bestselling author Jeff Selingo. Sessions will dig into practical ideas and innovative strategies to get your team more student-centered and ready to adopt AI. And many of your favorite Enrollify hosts are presenting too, like Jamie Hunt, Jenny Lee Fowler, and Brian Gross. Use the discount code Enrollify50 for an extra $50 off your registration. Learn more and register at engage.element451.com. We can't wait to see you there.
I think that that's why we spent so much time throughout this process of socializing along the way with the various groups and the stakeholders, because the other quote is like, those support that which they help create. We very much believe that. And so like bringing them along throughout the process, the understanding of like what the research, what the implications were. So to Ethan's point of like, they deeply understand the why, and they deeply understand the student and their drivers, because and how that informs other things that, yes, we may change the marketing strategy and the brand and a campaign, but you're targeting a very specific set of student that has very specific questions and apprehensions and fears, and you want to be able to answer those through not just your marketing, but when they call an admissions officer, right? Like, you want to make sure that they're prepped and they deeply understand them to the level as your marketers do. The other one, and that we talk about a lot, and Ethan will have to tell me who says it, but like the quote is, how well a brand is delivered externally is dependent upon how well it's understood internally. And that is one that we live by all the time too. And I think that for that merger piece is so important. And then the training didn't stop after launch. We relaunched the brand on April 3rd, 2023. So we just came up on a year, just really, of the new brand and like marketing strategy be out in the marketplace. But we have ongoing touch points with admissions, with others, like in focus groups and learnings, so that you can continue to improve.
Yeah, I think just on the front side of that one, you hit on this idea, and we spent a lot of time on it here now, and I think we did at Purdue and certainly at Lilly, and that's the difference between an idea or a good idea and an insight, right? And that insight is that penetrating human truth that allows one to unlock prosperity and growth and opportunity. And so what do you understand so deeply that becomes insightful for your org and the ethos of what it's going to go do? And maybe Kati can briefly speak to the 3 insights, but that's what we had to saturate was, when we think about these students, what do we know about them that's a pain, a frustration, aspiration, attention that insightfully we can address better than anybody, and we can speak to it in a way from, again, the very beginning to the very end. And if we do that in character, then that is delivering on the brand promise. So maybe Kati, what are the 3 insights that you understood about these students?
So number one is that they want to earn a quality degree that they trust and they respect, that employers are going to respect. And if they're going to spend their time and money, they want it to be worth it. They want it to be legit. Number 2, that they want their life and work experience and what they bring to the table to be recognized. And they want that to kind of help propel them along their journey towards future success. So they want to know that, maybe if they started college and then stopped and restarted again, or maybe they'd been in the workplace for 10 or 15 years, that wasn't a waste. That actually helps them along the way. So the 3rd insight is they have this deep understanding of being capable of more, that really that earning a degree is that stepping stone to unlocking opportunity for themselves and for their family. And they really looked at it as a redemptive opportunity for themselves to be able to grow. And we use all 3 insights in our storytelling and our marketing, but really our overall like marketing campaign is centered around that I'm capable of more, which is like with a big idea of comeback. And so like that's where the comeback campaign really stems from.
And I just like those. Yeah, I like those so much. The 2 thoughts that come to mind for me are, one, I think it's Ross Simmons who says that marketing is about freeing folks from something. And Tony Fadell at formerly Apple and then Nest, et cetera, the creator of the iPhone largely talks about, can you understand a pain and then be their painkiller? And I think when a student is sitting there thinking, I'm going to invest those precious hours and those precious dollars that I have on top of my family and my job and all of my constraints, again, can I trust this provider? And when I put that degree down on a table, are they going to respect it, right? Are they going to trust me and treat me like a working adult who has years of experience and lived experience? And 3, right now, I feel like I can sit at that table. And I just need at times the paper, the credential, the learning, the blessing to prove to folks, what I'm worth. And so I think being able to be the painkiller to some of those pains, those very emotional pains, is a great marriage. And if you don't have that insight, then I think you're thin in terms of your true marketing.
I think a little bit of Ethan's Lilly background is coming into play here, pharmaceuticals and all that. But I do love that idea of being a painkiller for people. And yeah, first identifying the pain point, and Apple and other brands are genius at even identifying it before people even verbalize and express that this is actually a pain point. So, the work that you've done certainly feels very, it like augmented some of the existing operations of a an online global education. So, was there any sort of challenge that you felt, or were there as you were merging the two brands? So, as you're trying to, I think data is a great unifier. I think data and insights can help people come to the same table and understand, okay, this is what a population is seeking. Can you talk a little bit about anything that perhaps wasn't going as swimmingly, but you were able to navigate that? Because, like I said, and perhaps you believe as well, that what you were really doing was additive. You were trying to identify a story on something that was perhaps more transactional.
I'm happy to go first on this one. I think when you talk about the merging of operations, the merging of culture, the merging of two entities that are looking at a single brand, maybe from different sides, I think for us, and it's still a challenge, I think, and it is many places. You see Brian Chesky making the announcement a year ago about this with Airbnb, and that is how much do you value and trust the investment in brand. It's one thing to be completely in on performance marketing and to believe that dollars in results in leads, acquisition, et cetera. It's another thing to have that probably false trust in some respects of attribution, right? Google talks about the messy middle. It's not a linear customer journey, and there's lots of messy touch points that influence a consumer's decision. But for us, I think the bet we made, and it's Bennett and Fields and others, was at some point performance marketing alone is going to poop out, and it's going to become very expensive to continue to acquire because there is no belief and there's just not enough in the top of the funnel. And so, as they say, the 60-40 rule or whatever you decide to put in it, we went heavy on this idea that we needed to build a brand, right? They say that if you don't have marketing, nobody will know you, but if you don't have a brand, no one will give a shit. That was our worry, right? And I think at that point, a challenge and a struggle, and it's something that we have to be able to do well, is to be able to advocate and be evangelists for the value of brand and the investment in brand necessary with faith that it's going to pay off. And for some, especially the financially minded, that's a big leap for many to take across all industries. And so I think for all that where do people stand on the issue of brand and the building of brand perceptions when it may not be as linear or easy to quantify at times?
Yeah.
And are you willing to put that investment there or not?
I mean, that seems to be a pretty pervasive challenge and issue in higher education for people who are really not in the marketing space. Everything is quantified by enrollment or advancement or whatever it is that the dollar should be attributed to. But it's like, okay, if people haven't heard of you, why would they even take that next step to consider you, right? The whole awareness, interest, desire, and action model, the original funnel for marketing. And I hope there are some non marketers listening to this and understanding again that you have to have a brand narrative and a compelling brand narrative before you invest any and all dollars in simply performance marketing. But because you're right, you are going to tap out.
It's the space for the first time where I heard such, and I'm not just saying with us, but across the space as a whole, I've never heard the word lead more often,
Mm,
right? At Lilly,
Right.
there was great focus on a patient, right? Or a human. I think at Purdue and other places, they talk about the student. This was about leads, right? And what that meant down the funnel in terms of acquiring or completing that enrollment. To me, you're missing the boat on these are students, these are humans, these are dads, they're moms, they're working professionals that we need to deeply understand and appeal to, right? Seth Godin says, if there's no brand, there is no choice. We were doing this. I just think the attribution model and the lead model to me is just kind of the widgetizing of higher education. And there's got to be brand there, especially when it is as commoditized and as complex and as crowded as higher education or online higher education for adults are.
Yeah, I mean, just a quick point on that. I mean, our partners at Google, like they'll tell us that even like talking about like the traditional marketing funnel, like once they get to that consideration set phase, they're down to like 2 universities maybe that they're researching to maybe even look at apply to. So if you are in their consideration set, so if you don't have brand at the top that they're even aware of you or they're offering sort of
Mm-hmm.
think you could be for them, you're not even in the
Yeah.
game to get them down to conversion.
So you launched a comeback campaign. You mentioned it's been a year in market. Is that right?
Yeah, it's officially been in a year in market this
Well,
week.
I have come across it, and not because of being in the field, but I may be the target audience. I don't know. Some of those insights I think do apply to me, so maybe. And it's wonderfully
You
done.
don't need any more degrees. God, you got plenty.
I'm in education,
You got plenty.
and I don't have a doctor in front of my names, which sometimes can be helpful when I'm talking to other doctors. You did all this work, you kind of really elevated the brand that you acquired to become more of a an emotional, connected, compelling story for your target audience. Do you have any results that you can speak of at this point? You talked about zero brand awareness.
Yeah, so we had the brand survey that was done with the zero unaided brand awareness in summer of 2022. We relaunched the campaign and a new marketing strategy. So it wasn't just the campaign, but it's also a marketing strategy shift into heavier top of funnel brand awareness, a holistic full funnel approach is how we like to call it. Did that in April, and then we reran a brand tracking study in October, November of this year, and the results came back and we were pretty positive. I was pretty pumped. So we came at 0% unaided brand awareness to a straight read of 5% unaided brand awareness growth. But we did ask a qualifying question this time, we did it across the board, was if at the unaided stage a respondent said Purdue, but they didn't say Purdue University or they didn't say Purdue Global, but they were also aware of Purdue Global at the aided stage. We asked them a clarifying question, said, hey, before when you said Purdue, did you mean Purdue University or did you mean Purdue Global? By asking that follow-up question, our unaided brand awareness went to 11%. So the campaign, so that, from a brand perspective is working. We've seen anywhere from, depending on like the month over month, 80 to like 150% and beyond increase in web traffic, like from ads, like from paid ads, from people seeing an ad and then clicking to learn more and going to purdueglobal.edu. That's been our YouTube views and traffic has been up almost like 90% year over year, and like watching the content. So we've had a lot of good indicators as we've gone along.
And I've been gone a little while, but I remember something I really liked hearing, not quantitative, but somewhat anecdotal. And when I go back to that lead acquisition model, you're talking about student fit, right? You're talking about the fit and the market fit, right, of that student that's coming and that we're spending time with, that we're trying to acquire. And it was almost instantaneous that our call center agents started saying, the students who are calling in now are demonstratively different and a better fit for our product. And so to me, that segmentation and that identification and speaking to that need of a subgroup of these students and them taking action was obvious and noticed even by our call center agents. And I love hearing that the right people that are going to have likelihood to succeed, right? I
Right,
want them to graduate.
right. Retention and
So give me the student
graduation.
that has that potential with us and in what we offer. The idea of the call center agents were saying that better fit individuals are calling and inquiring based on what they are seeing on TV and on web tells me that had a beautiful impact in helping us segment in a way we hadn't in the past.
A higher intent student,
There you
like
go.
they would say, like that they just when they call it that, they're a higher intent student, and that our percentage of those students, that would apply and then actually converting in enrolling and starting classes and persisting is trending in the right
Yeah,
direction as well.
that's
So
great to hear. I
that's what
mean,
was
yeah, it
real.
is ultimately about
Mhm.
student success. You can have all the leads at the top of the funnel, but if they're not the right fit student that will fit into the program and succeed and retain and graduate, are we doing right by the student? So this has all been very fascinating to hear, especially again as somebody who is very invested in anything Purdue does. But I hope for anyone who is in the M&A space or considering being in the M&A space, it is one of those things that does become part of the discussion, which is integrating two brands, whether it's merging or if it's acquiring. So, what advice would you give people, especially in marketing roles, that around this whole idea of how do you bring two brands together? Where should they even start?
I think, from a marketing perspective, if it's a merger, if it's an acquisition, but first and foremost, like you have to deeply understand the business. I deeply understood Purdue University. So from my own experience, I knew Purdue inside out. But when I got brought on like for Purdue Global, I was not as aware of Purdue Global and its offerings. And so first and foremost, just taking that time to deeply understand the current state and landscape and having clear alignment amongst all the stakeholders on what your overall objectives are and how you're going to go out and achieve those. And I just think that in any types of these situations, like you just can never over communicate with what's going on. Here's what's documented. Here's what we're working on. Here's what I understand. Is this, is that what you know too? Like, I just think that that continues to have that deep understanding of what you're trying to build, right? Like, what are those attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors that you want to instill as part of your merger or your acquisition? And turn it over.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good question. It's a big question. One of the things I think about, and it's not necessarily just here, but in general, is around culture and what that resulting culture is going to be in the acquisition and in the merger. It doesn't mean they both have to be vanilla, right? But there can be oil and water too. And so I think just understanding that, are we combining forces for a greater purpose thereafter, and what maybe some of the warts or the challenges in that are going to be. There's this great quote going around online right now from Brian Chesky, where he talks about that early on in the history of Airbnb, there was a copycat competitor that would stand up next to them, copy them, and actually got many, many times bigger than Airbnb at the point where they wanted to be bought. And he describes the decision not to buy them, and he says that Airbnb at the time was a missionary, and these guys were mercenaries. And he said that missionaries will always outlast mercenaries. And in their case, they did. They went global. They're $100 billion company now. You've never heard of this other one. But he looked at the culture and he said, these guys are not getting into it for what we're in it for. They're in it to cash out. We're in it to create a lasting impact, a ding in the universe. And so I think that cultural assessment of, do we buy them or not, was really important. For me, I think that cultural assessment, that capability assessment, is really key, because it's a marriage, and you got to work together when it's over. And so how that's going to go in true merger fashion is, I think, something you have to deal with upstream, not try to retrofit it downstream.
Absolutely. That is something that we've been hearing, or at least I've been hearing as I've been talking to different guests about M&A. The whole culture fit is so critical. And, there's only so much you can understand by talking to people, but there's so much more you can understand when they become a part of who you are too.
I think it's the language that's used, it's
Yeah,
the what they value, it's how they do business, how do they make decisions, how do you make investments. All of that you can get some read on, and there's some intuition, I think, on that of, is this going to be a good a good wife in this partnership.
right. Yes. Whether it's a good marriage or if it's a good in law relationship, I think all of those have to be assessed early on, is one of my takeaways from this episode, in addition to getting a deeper look into this case study. Ethan and Katie, thank you so much. If people want to learn more about how you navigate this process, or just learn a little bit more about you and your journey, where can they find you?
I'm on LinkedIn, easily accessible there, and my email address is pratt46@purdue.edu. So happy to chat.
Yep, same. Or Ethan Braden at LinkedIn, or now find me at Texas A&M.
All right. Thank you both so much for your time today, and have a wonderful day, and boiler up.
This Pulse Check mini-series has been brought to you by Pathify. Gone are the days of clunky interfaces, disjointed systems, and massive, unhelpful link farms. Centralize all your systems with Pathify so that students see the information that matters to them in a digital experience that actually makes sense. From prospective students through alumni, it's about time the student experience started looking and acting like a consumer app from this century. Visit pathify.com for more. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform helping institutions create meaningful and personalized interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.